A number of Western countries have recently recognized the state of Palestine and called on Israel to establish two states. France and several other Western countries officially announced on Monday their recognition of the Palestinian state at the United Nations. This further deepens Israel's international isolation as it pursues its military objectives in the Gaza Strip and expands settlements in the occupied West Bank. At the same time, United States President Donald Trump condemned France, Britain, Canada, and several other Western countries for recognizing the state of Palestine, stating that this only encourages militant actions. Hamas claims this is a signal that terrorists can carry out a massacre in another country, and it will trigger a wave of recognition in the West. He says this is absurd, and the United States will not support this idea. But still, let's discuss what the point of recognizing Palestine is and what will happen next. Is this just a symbolic step or the beginning of the path to creating that very Palestine? My name is Alexei Pecci, and before we start digging deep into this topic, I want to remind you that this YouTube channel releases several news analysis segments every day about events around the world, so that you can stay up to date with absolutely all the news. That's why I recommend subscribing to this YouTube channel. So, the first to recognize the state of Palestine this week were Britain, Canada, Portugal, and Australia. Later, France joined this list, and it was France that promoted this idea at the United Nations General Assembly. Monaco, Malta, and Luxembourg expressed their support for the decision to create two states, Israel and Palestine, at a summit co-chaired by France and Saudi Arabia. Belgium also announced its recognition, but stated that its recognition would only take legal effect after the elimination of Hamas and the return of all hostages. And so, speaking at the summit, French President Emmanuel Macron told the United Nations General Assembly that recognizing the Palestinian state is, quote, the only solution that will allow Israel to live in peace, calling this step a defeat for Hamas. Here are Macron's exact words. We must do everything possible to preserve the very possibility of a two-state solution, Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security. Recognizing the rights of the Palestinian people in no way diminishes the rights of the people of Israel, whom France has supported from day one. And during the summit that took place, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres called the situation in the Gaza Strip unpleasant and intolerable, and stated that the two-state solution is the only way out of this nightmare. And so, rejecting criticism, he stated that statehood for the Palestinians is a right, not a reward, and that without it there will be no peace in the region. Thus, as of today, more than 145 United Nations member states have recognized Palestinian statehood. However, this step is mostly symbolic, since it does not have the support of the United States of America, which has the right to veto United Nations membership. Without this, Palestine won't exist. Suddenly, the United Nations began discussing that, according to, after almost 2 years of bloodshed in the Gaza Strip and an increase in the number of Israeli outposts in the occupied West Bank, fears are growing that Palestinian statehood is becoming an elusive prospect. Supposedly, we need to do this faster. And so, speaking before the summit, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Denny Danon, stated that the United States and Israel would not participate in the summit on Palestine and expressed disappointment with Macron. At the weekly government meeting on Sunday, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated that Israel would fight at the United Nations and other international forums against slanderous propaganda, as well as against calls for the creation of a Palestinian state, which, in his opinion, would threaten our existence and become an absurd reward for terrorism. Israel's Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, stated that the recognition requires immediate consultations. Israel's National Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, said that the recognition requires immediate consultations. Israel's Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, stated that immediate consultations are required. It should be understood that the United States has often used its veto power in line with Israel's foreign policy, blocking, for example, last year a Security Council resolution that would have recognized a Palestinian state. And now France's statement contradicts the position of the United States. United States President Donald Trump stated last week that he does not agree with the United Kingdom in its plans to recognize the Palestinian state. And then it seems more and more to him that all this loud recognition of Palestine will not lead to anything. France is not giving up here and insists that the New York Declaration already exists, signed by 142 United Nations members this month. The resolution, which outlines steps toward a two-state solution and supports the creation of a Palestinian government without Hamas, serves as the basis for the peace plan. And here I'll give you a quote from the statement by the Élysée Palace. The September 22 initiative is based on specific commitments that the president of the Palestinian Authority conveyed to President Macron. That's the whole point. This includes the law on prisoners, the reform of the school system, and holding the next elections within an improved electoral system. Therefore, recognition is seen as a lever that is expected to bring concrete benefits to peace. Well, let's reflect on that. I admit that Emmanuel Macron and other Western governments are only working on the surface. The main question is, what happens next? Well, fine, you've announced the recognition of the state of Palestine. What happens next? For example, if the state of Palestine is recognized, where are the borders of this state? Who will determine them and how will they be determined? Where are the borders of the state of Palestine? To the situation of which year will the supporters of Palestine refer when drawing that very border? Let's move on. What is the currency of this state? The currency, what is its economy like, and how does this state form its national budget? Does this state control all of its territory? Where is the capital of Palestine? And so on. And most importantly, how can democratic elections be held in Palestine, especially in the Gaza Strip? The thing is, the last elections in the Gaza Strip were held 20 years ago, and back then, who do you think won? That's right, the Hamas movement, which started a new chapter of war. For the last 20 years, there has been a total Hamas dictatorship in the Gaza Strip. There are no political forces in that part of Palestine, so how are they going to hold elections there? Between whom exactly? In short, there are more questions than answers. That's why it all looks like an attempt to play out a domestic agenda in Western countries, and nothing more. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, and be sure to subscribe to this channel. Click the bell, give a like, take care of yourselves. That's all for now. Goodbye, everyone.